Welcome back. It's time that you start doing template insertion work yourself. Today, you're going to start building in your first template. So I recommend open your browser, logged in on the Weagree Wizard, either on the new contract page or on the administrator page. Also, from the admin materials, the training materials, download the Word document Evaluation License Agreement Training 1. We're now going in several sessions to build in a template yourself, do some troubleshooting, help you out with the typical errors that you might make, and step by step you're going to insert the template yourself. The building blocks, level 1, level 2, level 3, as I explained in the previous session. You're going to create cross references, and basically you're going to start creating a template yourself. I started with the screen on the new contract page because what we see over here is important for the first step that we're now going to take. What you see over here is, first of all, that templates are organized through the user groups, and that you can only see those templates that relate to the user groups you're a member of. So you need to understand the concept of user groups for starting to insert a template. Then you will see that there are some headers, categories under which the templates are organized. Every template has a name, which is not necessarily the title of the template, but it very much correlates with the title, of course. There are some guidance notes explaining when or how or where to use the template, and you may see PDFs, which gives you the possibility to add the end user, give the end user guidance. It's a PDF with just a 1 or 2 pager, or for my part 100 pages of guidance, which is not the contract itself, but it's the guidance note for the end user, what to do next. And what to do, for example, if the counterparty comes back with comments, how to deal with that. Let's go to the admin tooling. Previous training I introduced you to the template creation tool. Well, that's where we are going to arrive right now. And the first thing we're going to do is to insert the template ourselves. We know already that this is the overview of the templates. And yes, in the overview you will recognize typically what you just saw on the new contract page. Now we're going to create it ourselves. So click on the prominent item on the left-hand side that says Insert a Template, and it will open up a pop-up which allows you to enter that information that is relevant for the end user to see or find on the new contract page. We are going to insert an evaluation license agreement, and what is being asked over here is to enter the template name. It's basically what is going to be shown on the evaluation license on the new contract page. If you are doing these training together with some colleagues, or if you are not the only one taking training for the Weagree Wizard, then I recommend that you add your own initials to the template name. So evaluation license agreement. And what I am doing over here, because if you have several users following the admin training, then you will have for every person for every person you will have exactly the same template name. For our training purposes, I'm going to add my initials, Willem Wiggers, WW, to the name. You should add your own initials to distinguish it from other templates which have the same evaluation license agreement title. What you would do in real life, of course, is that, as you saw, that you give some template name or template type related information that is too much hidden if it were to be included in the explanatory note. Then what you do is you indicate for the template where you want this to be shown on the new contract page. That could be a sales agreement, it could be procurement, financing. For us, we're going to do admin training, and we're going to therefore put them under the dedicated header that we have created, admin training templates. Then I already told you that templates are made available to user groups, and of course end users are allocated or assigned to user groups so that they don't see the full bunch of all the templates that are available, but only those templates that are relevant for the user group that they are a member of. So you need to select the one that applies over here. And for our purposes, for template insertion purposes, you can choose for either under construction or testing and acceptance, and pick the template from there. Then it is possible to filter templates based on authorization level, hire authorized users to see and create therefore more templates based on their authorization level. The guidance note that I was talking about, you can upload them over here, drag and drop, or browse to the right folder. The guidance note for how to use the templates or what to do after generating the Word document and probably after receiving feedback from the other party. If you want to give some explanatory notes, or if you want to give some background info on whether the template is useful or not, you can insert the explanatory note over here. So in the case of an evaluation license agreement, you would explain in the explanatory note that this is for evaluating technology or software, whether it is useful, in case no POC, proof of concept agreement is to be agreed. Then you can indicate whether templates need to be subject to versioning. That is not necessarily something that is helpful or useful in case of small templates like these ones, but if you really have big templates like a general purchasing agreement, in case of financing or M&A transactions, share purchase agreement or shareholder agreement or other extensive agreements, then you want to have consistency version of a version in the future, and you want to enable versioning of templates, as we call it. You can always switch this on at later stage once you decide that there's going to be a second version. So for the time being, I leave it switched off. Then projects is a little bit outside the scope of these admin trainings, but if you do link template questionnaires to each other, so the questionnaire of a term sheet for a definitive agreement, you want to link those Q&A questions to each other, or if you create a project where closing documentation and the main agreement are interconnected, then you would do that in the framework of a project. As a third example, if you have a master services agreement with all kinds of sub-agreements, you would create that in the framework of a project as well. Now, that's not what we're going to do right now. It requires a little bit, it's basically an extension of what we're going to do right now, so I'm leaving this off, and I recommend that you do that as well. Because the effect of it is that the template that you're creating will only be visible from within the project and will not be selectable on a new contract page. So if you switch it on, it will not be visible on a new contract page, and there's no reason for that at this moment in time. Also, this is something you can switch on later on if you find that it is becoming necessary. Then the dot files that define the font size, type of numbering, indentation and the like. You can select the dot file that applies to the evaluation license agreement that we're creating over here. And you could, but you should not now, you could import the document in an automated manner. That is a very useful tooling that we are exceptionally proud of, the highly accelerating way it works for your implementation work. But for educational purposes or didactical reasons, we're not, so you should not switch automated import on. No, leave it off. We're going to do the manual copy-paste work for inserting the template during the next steps of the training. So don't do it. But there's a separate session in these series of admin training sessions where I'm going to explain to you how the tooling works, and you will see that it's really, really very convenient and significantly accelerating your implementation work. For now, click Save, and it will bring you into the template creation tool that I introduced already in the previous training. You will then arrive in the template creation tool that I introduced already in the previous training session, and it will start with the pop-up template settings opened. And that is because certain template settings are, well, you will likely want to configure them, and it depends a little bit on the template and the context how you want to configure it. First of all, it opens in the General Template Properties subtab that you see over here, and it assumed that the document title that will show up on the cover page and everywhere in footers and is the agreements title, that is one-on-one the same as you had inserted for being shown on the new contract page. Now that is not entirely the case because I added my initials, and you might have added in the framework of another template some other information. Clearly this is my initials. You don't want to have them on the cover page of the agreement, so you don't want to have here my initial shows. That doesn't make any sense. So I suggest that you remove them and basically make this the title of your contract. Then it puts your name over here. We have, for example, Weagree admin over here. I'm going to put my initials because we have several teams that may do some implementation work, and then we know how. I can indicate which cover page I would like to apply, if any. If I leave it open, then the agreements that I'm going to create will not have a cover page. I can indicate if I want to have a table of contents being inserted. I can identify which house style, so apart from the cover page, the house style we're going to apply. As I said in the previous session, the house style defines what is in the headers and the footers, what is in the headers and the footers of the schedule and annexes, the body of the agreement, or probably also on the cover page, what is the header above a table of contents, and some other features that relate to house style and that you would like to apply uniformly. And it depends a little bit on how you are going to use these documents, whether you want to have them in a draft documents format or in just a standard format. Generally on portal level, you would define how contracts are named, so documents that are being generated by the Weagree Wizard, what kind of name format they follow. You can it's actually suggested that it's the short name of the counterparty and the document title, whether modified or not during the questionnaire. That is basically the naming of the Word document. If you want to have some other parameters, you can basically tweak those over here, and it will override the portal settings for the evaluation license agreements that you're going to generate. Then you need to select the language, that is to say the culture. There are several cultures on the portal, but also here Weagree supports basically all languages of the world. So if you have installed your cultures, your language, you would select that over here. Dates are printed differently in English, of course, than in French, German, or any other language. And so that is culture. So for ease of reference, English is the language of this template, the culture. You can select the dot file or basically change the dot file over here if you want to use another one. Then two tick boxes that are particularly interesting, and it depends really on the type of agreement that you're going to automate. First of all, you can process, if you wish, the questionnaire annex by annex. What does it mean? It depends on the context. Sometimes you have an agreement with annexes that contain 1 or 2 questions. And if you have only a very few questions, then you don't want to process the questionnaire annex by annex. 1 question, next. 1 question, next. Answer 1 third question, next. That's annoying for a questionnaire where there are few questions during the questionnaire. But we also find the opposite, where you have 20 annexes with each annex or exhibits triggering 10, 20 or 30 questions. And in those cases, you don't want to process your annexes in one single shot, but you want to process the questionnaire step by step. First have 4 or 5 questions, next, schedule, second set of Q&A questions. And this really depends on the type of agreement and how your agreement actually is, whether you tick the box or not. Then for another thing, if you have annexes to the agreement, you don't necessarily want them to show up in the WYSIWYG, in the real-time editor during your questionnaire. That would typically follow the same question here. If you have quite some questions popping up triggered in the schedules and annexes, then typically you would want to see what the effect of answering the questionnaire is in the underwater screen. But we also see that sometimes the schedules contain a full set of general terms and conditions, full sets of standard boilerplate text, code of conduct or the like, and in those cases you might decide that it is not really helpful to clutter the screen and have this information shown in the real-time editor. So either you decide on the basis of that whether you want to see it or not. Then we're not going to run through all the tabs that you see over here. I would like to mention at least one, being the parties one, and that's actually quite an important one, because each time you're going to work with the template, the pop-up will open until you have filled essentially the party 1 reference and the party 2 reference. It basically asks you, how is party 1 referred to in this template and how is party 2 referred to. Now let's go into the work document. I'm going to browse a little bit downwards. As you see, we will have then the party 1 being a licensor and the party 2 being the licensee. The party 1, it's a sort of standard practice that the first party listed in the parties block is your own legal entity. So if we go back into the tooling, you will see that the party 1 reference will dig or use the own party database, and that the party 1 reference should be licensor. And for the party 2 reference, as you could have seen in the parties block, the counterparty in an evaluation license agreement would be a licensee. Then it's a little bit technical, but it has to do with how the interaction design works. Once you select the template, whether you want to jump straight into the questionnaire or whether there should be an intermediate contract properties page where you can deal with a whole lot of things that relate to the contract. But in the framework of creating and answering a questionnaire, you're most likely to want to bypass the contract properties, so you most likely want to leave this box ticked on. Then you can indicate what type of party details are to be asked in all cases, prompted anyhow, regardless of whether they are actually used in the template. That is to say, if you do use address line 1 or 2 in the template, or if you do use certain information in a template, and then it will be triggered in the pop-up where party details are to be inserted. But if you want the end user to enter more data than that, because in an NDA you go on a high level through the questionnaire and you don't necessarily want to insert things like place of registration or country registration or registration number or the like, you would probably untick those over here, and they won't be asked if they are not used in the NDA or in the letter of intent, because you are still on a high level way of creating your document. But if you do want the end user to enter that type of information, because at a later stage you are going to reuse the party details, name, address lines and the like entered for the letter of intent or an NDA, then you might be helped triggering the user at the outset for entering those details as well. It depends, of course, also on the policy, what type of information generally is asked. Then, if there are workflow triggers during the questionnaire, you would basically trigger them over here. That's outside the scope of this training. Then the document upon an import will, the originals against which you want to make compares of what comes out of the Weagree Wizard, you would list them over here. It also allows you to generate an all options document so that you can see all the options next to each other in the Word document that are in the template eventually. And you can create compares here, of course. Then if a template has a particular owner who needs to receive the feedback, then if you add their names over here, that will override the list of administrators that I showed in the previous admin training on the administrator page. So if you want to have owners of this template mentioned specifically and notified specifically and only for these templates, you should list them over here. That's what I wanted to show you about the template settings. You can export eventually the template after insertion, but that's not relevant for now. Let's save the changes and start inserting our template ourselves. Now, I told you in the previous session, and as you've seen in template settings, you would select the cover page by way of inserting the standard layout from the house styles. The house style that you selected defines, and you tick the box in the template settings whether you want to include a table of contents, but the house style settings then define what is the header of the lists of annexes and the table of contents. What we are not going to start with is the first building block, which is the parties block. That has to do with it's for didactical reasons. It's not very helpful to start with the exceptions and then explain you all the exceptions, because it's not very effective for your learning curve. We're also not going to start with the preamble of the agreement, because here the exceptions are even more abundant. We're also not going to talk about the definitions right now. For that purpose, there's a separate training tutorial. We are going to start to insert an evaluation license, Article 2, build in clause level 1, clause on level 2, clauses on level 3, etc., etc. So let's go back. Evaluation license is the article that we are going to start with. And there are not many buttons that you can see over here that you can use right now. Your strategy would be that you're going to read the text labels of the buttons that are available, and that you insert then the building blocks one by one. So let's start with the article evaluation license. Go ahead. Insert a new building block would be your action over here. And if you click on it, it asks you to enter the name of the building block. And as I said, it needs to be an evaluation license that you are going to insert. So click, and here's the building block. Now that's a good start. This can't go wrong hardly, because it's a must that you start with level 1 clauses. What do you see on the right hand side? It assumed that the naming that you use for the building blocks on the left-hand side correlate with the title, the text that needs to be assigned to it in the agreement itself eventually. And that's actually correct. It is dropped down by default set on level 1. And you might change it right now. It won't change the structure on the left-hand side anymore. For now it's correct. What you should not be doing over here is one thing is that you start formatting what the clause over here. So you should not select the text over here and make it bold or all caps. That is defined in the dot file, in the .x file. What you should also not do is pick the Word document and copy paste the full text, because it will really be built up one by one, clause by clause, and each and every clause would take their own styling over here, as I explained in the previous session. So you should not add here the text of clause 2.1, license grant. That is something that you should do step by step, block by block. In the automated import, that I'm going to explain in another tutorial, so it's when you didn't use the switch automation on, automated import on, there things will be automatically arranged. For now we're going to build the template ourselves. The level 2 clause, license grant, that needs to be inserted. I suggest that you try to figure out how to insert it. Your strategy again would be to look on the buttons, what for the text flags, what they actually do. A new building block could be it. That's where it often goes wrong. A new contract clause is more appropriate. It's really an indented item, and that's, if you look at how it works over here, you might agree with me that it should be indented license grant, license grant, and you get your sub item over here. Weagree assumes that if you insert one on sort of indented level 2 over here, that it is actually also going to be a clause of level 2. And what you also see is that it assumes that while you give the clause the naming of the caption, that you would want that to appear, and it will insert a caption that relates to this. Why is that made a caption? That is because in the house style it is defined that the text of the captions is to be made magenta in our case. You can define your own coloring, you can define whether it should be all caps, bold print, or underlined, or whatever you want to format it in. And what you will then insert is basically the text of the clause and close it up with the tag that precedes it. So subject to article 3, blah, 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 here's the text of the clause. So far so good. You save the changes. If you forget to save the changes, you get a warning. Let me force something like that. If I go away, then it will give me a warning and ask me whether I actually do want to move away from the page. I should click cancel and save the changes first. Then I suggest that we go ahead with the clause license scope. And here is a little bit of variation on the previous action, which is that the license scope is also one of level 2. So it should not be inserted as indented as opposed to this clause, but same indentation straight underneath it. This is where it could go wrong for subsequent license scope, subsequent clauses. There's the troubleshooting tutorial where we're going to deal with these type of errors and how to fix those. So don't worry, and I'm going to create some ironic clauses where we're going to repair it. Now, then we get to a new type of clause, being the level 3 clause. And here again, this is one that is going to be indented. And the level 3 clause, if we analyze the text, it's the license scope being the number of end users, probably a useful clause name. So number of end users. You can click enter and it will save it, and then you don't see a caption, and that has to do with the fact that captions tend not to be used on level 3 typically. I copy paste the text over here. It's already indicated to become a level 3 clause, and I need to save my changes, of course. Then a clause on the temporal scope of the license. So temporal scope indents the same way, is temporal scope, press enter, copy paste the text over here, and what you will then see is that it doesn't fit this blob well, but that's what we're going to do ourselves. Again, it's on the same indentation here on the left hand side in the navigation structure. So as it is in the same indentation, it will be assigned a level 3. And then if you want to end up with this blob that sort of jumps off the page once you print the document, you would need to insert, instead of this funny pipe symbol, you need to insert what we call this blob, a thick bullet point. It's really a remarkable bullet point. It's not necessarily very visible on the screen, but if you print out the document, it will truly jump off the page. So if you forget to enter details over here at the moment of signing the agreement, browsing through the scrolling through the document to sign it, you should see this blob clearly jumping off the page. You can create it automatically, but you can use the button over here, put the cursor on the place where I had this sign, and then you see that it inserts this tag starting with square brackets, and between square brackets you have this asterisk. Now, because I also want to have square brackets around the blob so that I can search replace the document before printing it for signing, I would need to add an extra set of square brackets surrounding this tag for the blob. The 90 days is something that we're going to make variable during next training. I'm going to save my changes and then insert the license fee clause. So let's step into that. Then how does this work? Here you can't outdent a clause, so you would go back either on license scope or on evaluation license agreement, but let's keep it sort of simple. On focusing on license scope, you would insert this as an same indentation clause. So see the difference really between these two icons that build the structure on the left hand side and allow you to indent it or non-indent it. Then that was the license fee that we were talking about. It inserts the caption once again. I copy paste the text in here. It is correctly listing level 2 and I save the changes. And here we are, we have inserted article 2 so far. Now, let's go to article 2 and see if we can create this restrictions and ownership clause. Which should end up on level 1, of course, because it's a sort of level 1 numbering. It will become a Lego stone. If I insert here the restrictions and ownership, then for one thing, if I copy paste the text over here, you see that it pastes essentially the numbering of the clause. You should remove that. It's not going to automatically renumber. It's just a fixed and hard number that's being inserted. So you should not leave this in your outline. Of course, if you disagree with me and if you do want to have that numbering with very lengthy agreements where there are no clauses in between that fall out due to Q&A questions, then it could make sense to keep the numbering in there. But generally I would say take out the numbering. Restrictions and ownership is the clause. Then your subclause would be license restrictions. You would edit license restrictions as the title, insert or press enter, that's equally the same. Once again, license restrictions is listed over here as a level 2 clause. Now, and then the principle doesn't change that much, except that I would like to introduce a new concept. So far, we have been inserting the clauses clause by clause, and that's actually really how you should do it. It will neatly format the underwater screen during your questionnaire. It will allow you to format it correctly in the underwater screen. Of course, that's the only place where you can steer how the Word document should look like. But very, very, very occasionally, it could be helpful to insert this as one single clause for whatever reason. I really want to discourage you to do that. But if you want to insert a list of restrictions, then you could consider putting them all in one single clause. I really want to discourage you doing so, because in the underwater screen only one of these items will be numbered, and in this case A, so that item B will not show up. Of course the text will be there, but and in the Word document it will work correctly, of course, but it doesn't look nice in the underwater screen. If there are any cross-references referring to any part of these listed clauses, cross-references will not work anyway. So also for that purpose, I don't even want to discourage you, I just want to tell you that it's not going to work. And then what you do on the places where the subclauses are to be divided, you would insert tags being EOL in our case, which is end of line, abbreviation of end of line. Put another one, then there's here yet another one, and then we have here the 5th division, and with 5 subclauses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you would have 4 dividers EOL, and in the Word document with the EOL they will all be separated, and each of those items will number according to the styling that you use over here. Indeed, there was one clause that is Article 2, referring to Article 2, and is a sort of continuation of the clause 3.1. It ties basically with 3.1, so it ties with this clause here, and then it has the enumeration and continues outdented or not fully indented anymore, not on the level 3, but indented on the level 2, as you can say. As you can see, so the indentation here is the same as level 2. And then we have the special thing, what we're going to see now, is that we want to insert a clause as part of the license restrictions underneath here. So while it continues, I would insert it indented, or otherwise, blah, blah, blah. It's not that important. And what you will see is then that it inserts again on level 3 if I insert the text over here. But there is one specialty that I want to introduce right now, which is that eventually this should not become a level 3 numbering clause. If we take a closer look, you may recall that I can give different styling, and that's actually what I want to achieve over here. This clause should be sort of level 2 clause, but it should not take the numbering of level 2. So the level 2, no numbering. And if you save this one, you will eventually see that when it comes out that this will not be indented at level 3 or so, like this, and it will also not show up like this, but you want it to come out without this number. And this is the way you can work with that. Now, I want to leave you inserting the other clauses of the evaluation license agreement and play with it a little bit yourself. Now it's becoming a sort of repetition of the same work, but I would like now to finish this tutorial with the explanation of how to insert a cross-reference. As you might have seen, in the license grant there was a reference to Article 3, but obviously at that moment in time Article 3, being the restrictions and ownership, was not there yet. We're going to insert it now, but first I'm going to insert this cross-reference that you have over here. As you can see, sorry, it is over here. Now, there's a slight difference between this oddity over here and the way it is presented over here. That's occasional, because the spacing here is slightly different from what it is in the Word documents margins. But imagine that it would be the same. Imagine that it is not Article 1, or that it doesn't keep it together, but that the 2 basically ends up at the beginning of a line. And this is very awkward. You don't want this to appear. If you're going to insert templates the royal way, then you really want to have this with a non-breaking space in between it. It keeps the word article with the numeral 2. We're going to insert an automated cross-reference, and the non-breaking space is one that you can insert yourself. You click here on insert a non-breaking space, and it will insert a sort of sign, symbol that is a degree sign. If you look into the Word document and you show all the underwater signs like paragraph and or like the space over here and over here, you will see that the non-breaking space within Word is this degree sign. So first of all, when you start making a cross-reference, you would typically start with a non-breaking space. It's a good habit to do that. Then the second thing is you want to create a cross-reference and refer to Article 2. Inserting the cross-reference means that you work with the content, so the button that you're going to use is on the right-hand side. It's not really, while it is related to content, it's not really formatting related, and hence we're going to look in the upper right button bar. If you slowly browse the button text, you will find one, create a cross-reference. Put the cursor on the place where the cross-reference needs to be inserted and click Create Cross-Reference. What it will do, it produces the full outline of the template as we have been inserting it so far. So really you can see the full outline of the template. Next step is that you click on that clause to which you want to make the cross-reference. And in this case it's Article 2, of which we know that it is this evaluation license header. And then the next thing is basically that you click Insert and save the changes, don't forget it. And let's analyze what we have achieved over here. First of all, it starts with a square bracket opening, the word reference, indicating that it's going to be a cross-reference, a full stop, the name of the clause to which reference is going to be made. That is actually only for convenience. If you want to modify this text, you're completely fine because it will not affect the cross-reference to come out. a unique number, which is really this number of this clause that we refer to in the database. So any other reference to any other clause will take a different number. This is the unique database number. And you will assign switches to it, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But I can say already that the H, for example, in the switch indicates that it will become a clickable cross-reference, so that if you are in the Word document and click on the cross-reference, that it actually, the Word document jumps to that cross-reference. Now, that's it for this cross-reference. We had one at the very beginning of the contract, as you can see over here, Article 3. I think it's really a good habit to, first of all, you delete it, to keep on using, even if it's very unlikely that they ever apply the non-breaking spaces. You can use the non-breaking spaces also in words like 30 days or 60 days that are in the running text of your agreement, because you also don't want to have the word 30 at the end of the line and the word days on the next line. That's also equally awkward. And then again, you click create a cross-reference, and you would in this case link to restrictions and ownership. Don't forget to click on the clause. If you don't click on the clause, nothing will happen. Now let's do some sidestep to see what this other button means. I'll leave it up to you to read what is all here, but sometimes cross-reference won't come through neatly, or you want to have it slightly differently. For example, 2.1a is not always added if you refer from clause C, and in that case you want to have the context in which the paragraph appears. Or you just want to have the number and not the context of the clause library. So typically, if something goes wrong with your cross-references, it has to do with the fact that you need to change this setting over here. And the formatting, you can put the cross-references all in lowercase. Think of the situation where the article is named like Article 1, Article 2, and you want that to appear in lowercase. Now, that's not something relevant for now. I'm changing it over here, the setting over here. And if you then insert, you will see that it gets a slightly different switch, not an R, but an N. And ultimately, your Word document will pick it up just like that. That is the topic of this third admin training, and I hope to see you in the next fourth training, where we are going to take further steps into your skills in automating contracts.